Our speaker today is Samuel Treanor. He will be reviewing how people find themselves in abusive situations, why they may stay, red flags of potential abuse, how childhood abuse carries through into adulthood, the invaluable services which STAND provides, and other pertinent aspects of the subject. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been seriously injured by an intimate partner. And 27% or more of children experience physical or sexual abuse. Samuel has been volunteering with STAND since 2020. As a volunteer, he has worked on the crisis and counseling line, worked on the advocacy task team, and has performed multiple presentations for STAND's Speakers Bureau. He is a survivor of domestic violence and continues working with STAND to help educate others about how prevalent and pernicious such violence can be. Samuel hopes that his continued work there can help break the cycle of violence for others. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Samuel Treanor to the podium.
So today we're going to be discussing domestic or intimate partner violence, and there will be 4 objectives to this. First, it's important that we have a common language. I'm going to be using several terms, and it's best that you understand what's going on, so we'll go over what these terms mean. Next, we'll go into an understanding of what domestic violence is, where it comes from, where it tends to end, what the impacts of violence are on the person, on the community, on the family, and then discuss a bit about what STAND does and some of the partnership opportunities available with it. So, a few group agreements, as was mentioned at the start. If you could make sure that any electronic devices are off and you're paying attention here, I request that you be present. But at the same time, exercise self-care. Be aware of what is going on in yourself. And there is a trigger warning, and as was mentioned, it is likely that about 1/3 to 1/4 of this room has experienced domestic violence or is currently experiencing it. So if you need space and time, you are perfectly fine to get up, walk out of the room. This is an interactive presentation, but I promise I will not call on you unless you raise your hand. But if you are uncomfortable, it's okay to step outside, take a few minutes, come on back. There will be no judgment on that. And then take and make space. So it's open. There's a lot of information here. Make space for yourself. And some of these presentations, there will some survivors discuss things that have happened with them. So if someone shares such a thing, it should not leave this room. If you learn something from this presentation, spread that everywhere. So any questions before we get started? All right, so let's start with some terms. Domestic violence is the most commonly recognized term. It has started moving out of favor with the various agencies that handle it because domestic violence typically is seen as stereotypically a man is an aggressor to a woman in a heterosexual partnership. The matters that STAND deals with are far broader than that. Next, we'll talk about family violence, and this is violence that can occur within the family. So it is not just partner to partner, it could be partner to child, partner to parent, child to grandparent, grandparent to child. What we're primarily going to be talking about is intimate partner violence, which is the more preferred term, and that is where one partner is abusing the other partner. And this term is a little bit more inclusive. It includes heterosexual, homosexual, different forms of relationship, married, unmarried, dating, online relationships, and the like. And we'll briefly touch on issues with teen dating violence. Teens have some additional concerns because they are not on their own typically. There is usually another level of secrecy. Sometimes, for example, teens aren't allowed to date, and yet if they are, who are they going to tell if there is a problem with it? So these are the terms that I'm primarily going to be using, and we'll just go on from there. So as was stated, about 1 in 3 women and about 1 in 4 men report having experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. And I want you to note the key word there. This is what has been reported. This does not encompass everyone. It is likely that the statistics are a bit higher than that. 14% of women and 5% of men report having been stalked by an intimate partner. This number has been going up with the increase in technology. Cyber stalking is becoming far more prevalent. It is easier to find someone's address. About 1 in 12 high school students have experienced physical dating violence. Approximate same number have experienced sexual dating violence. So let's talk about what the definition of DV is. What is domestic violence? What is intimate partner violence? It is a learned range of behaviors used in a pattern over time to maintain power and control. So let's break this down section by section, and this is where feel free to yell out if you want. If something is learned, what does it mean?
You've seen it.
You've experienced it. The other part of that is that it can be unlearned. It is a range of behaviors. In this case, the common perception is that domestic violence is all physical. It is not. Physical violence is about 15% of DV cases. There are a broad range of behaviors. It may be physical, it may be emotional, it may be psychological, but it's not just a single action. Used in a power pattern over time. This is not an isolated incident. This is not I had a bad day. This is something that keeps happening. And then to maintain power and control. What does it mean to maintain power and control? Is it something that, can you accidentally do something to maintain power and control? Maintaining yeah, go ahead.
It's to limit the behavior and goings and comings of the other.
It is with a purpose, to limit behavior. It is intentional. This is something that has been seen. It is being repeated. It is a range of behaviors. It is not just one thing. It is a multitude of actions that are used in a pattern. It is done regularly to maintain power and control. It is done regularly with intent. So, the important piece to learn from this is domestic violence can impact everyone in the family unit, from infants to elders. It is a common practice that when parents are arguing, whether it is a violent incident or not, the children are moved to the other room so that they can't see it. They know. They pick up on a lot of the signs of what is going on. And when it comes to a domestic violence relationship, they understand the consequences, but also they are learning from it. Domestic violence overall has similarities, but each one is unique to each family. Not every violent episode is physical. Not every violent episode is a heterosexual family. There are unique elements, but there is, as was mentioned in the last slide, there is a pattern to things. Domestic violence is influenced by society. What I commonly use is 80s movies, because those were the movies that I was watching when I grew up. You've got 16 Candles and a lot of the John Hughes movies where there are jokes about raping someone as a date or being able or it being romantic to follow someone until they break down and fall in love with you. More recently, we've got the Twilight series, which if you take out the vampire and werewolf, you have a predator stalking prey. You have an abusive relationship, and that is glamorized. Everyone wants to be Team Edward. And think about what that does for self-image. Domestic violence does not discriminate against any race, age, gender, income level, or sexual orientation. When I was on the crisis line, I was handling a couple of matters from people who make more in a week than I make in a year. The difference with the difference that comes about is what resources are available. There are statistically higher instances of domestic violence in some demographics, but it occurs in all of them. And it is important, again, it is about resources, it is about the culture around the person. Is it shameful to admit that someone is being abused? If it is, it's going to be hidden more. It's going to be less likely to be reported. So, I mentioned that physical is just one type of abuse. Isn't this a happy topic? I can just tell by everyone's faces. It's like, you know what? You should go into stand-up comedy. Okay, I'd probably get about the same result if I were to try that. Okay, so listed on the screen are various types of abuse. So let's look at them one at a time. Physical abuse, what does that look like? If anyone wants to say.
Black eyes.
Black eyes.
Bruises.
Bruises.
Broken bones.
Broken bones. If I just hit the wall, is that physical?
Depends on how you got there.
It's physical. I may not be hitting you, but there's still the threat
Yeah.
that I'm going to hit. Verbal and emotional abuse, what does that look like? Or I guess in this case, what does that sound like?
Calling someone stupid.
Calling someone stupid.
Belittling, yeah.
Belittling.
Bullying.
Bullying.
Yelling at them. Threatening.
What about not saying anything at all? Silent treatment. I don't know what's wrong and you won't tell me. Sexual abuse. This, the common one would be rape. More controversial one, but nevertheless still valid, is withholding sex. It's not because I don't have interest, it's because you did something wrong. And I know it's something that you want, and I'm not going to provide it to you because I need the power and control. Mental abuse. Common term that is going around now is gaslighting, as one example. Your reality isn't what I say it is. And so therefore and it makes me look bad, so therefore I'm going to make you doubt yourself. You are crazy. You are nuts. Anyone who could do this, would have done it. Spiritual abuse. We are in a ministry, so what would spiritual abuse look like?
Criticizing one's religious beliefs.
Okay. Shaming. What about saying something like, the Bible says that you have to do this? There's this section right here, whether it actually says it or not. You will believe what I tell you. Or culturally, if you were to bring this out, it would bring shame to your spiritual community. You can't talk about this at church because, I go there too and it will make us look bad. Financial economic abuse. And just as a spoiler alert, this is actually the most common element in violent cases. What would financial abuse look like?
Withholding money.
Withholding money. You can have an allowance. Oh, let's do the joint checking account thing. Oh, is there no more money there? Oops, I guess you have to stick around. You can't leave me because you don't have the money for it. Stalking. showing up at someone's workplace unannounced, following them, sending them emails and mails, and I know where you are. Cyber abuse is very similar to that. But it's more in the cybersphere. I'm going to say something nasty about you on Facebook. Or if I am going to control your Facebook profile. I'm going to hack. Common tactics of abuse. So this is what is called the power and control wheel. If we have, if the slides are available, I would recommend printing this one out in particular. We normally have this available. I wasn't able to get it this time, and there's another side to this, which is the equality wheel. But general tactics of abuse kind of go into what we were talking about before. You'll note one is using male privilege, and that is because statistically men are more likely to abuse than women. Doesn't mean that women don't abuse men, they do, but it is about the fact of using privilege. Privilege could even be racial privilege, societal privilege, financial privilege, but it's just using privilege in some way to exert control. Using children. How dare you do that? Think about what little Billy is going to see about that. What are you teaching the children? Using the children as third-party relays. That's a particularly nasty one. Common tactic is minimizing, denying, and blaming the other person. I didn't do it. Or if I did do it, it's not as bad as you say it is. Or if it's as bad as you say it is, it was your fault. But, isolation is often a common tactic as well. This involves basically over a period of time, again, we're dealing with a pattern over time, controlling who the other person sees. I don't like that friend. I don't trust them. If you loved me, you wouldn't stay with them. You wouldn't hang out with them. I need you to spend time with me. Using intimidation, punching the wall, punching something else. There was a case on the crisis line where there was a woman in a relationship for about 6 to 8 years, and early on in the relationship, her partner tried to strangle her. And this was in Bermuda. And I mentioned that it was in Bermuda because he never laid hands on her again, but he would often reference the Bermuda vacation if she was doing something that he didn't like. Economic abuse, keeping people from getting a job, forcing someone to get a job, tying it in with sexual abuse, forcing someone to prostitute themselves, using coercion and threats. If you do this, I'm going to do this to you. Or if you do this, I won't do this. Domestic violence, intimate partner violence goes in a cycle. And it starts all relationships start in the honeymoon period. If they don't, then they're usually not going anywhere. Everything is great about this other person. They are wonderful. Nothing seems to be going wrong. This is the rose-colored glasses. After a time in the relationship, tension starts to build. In every relationship, really, tension starts to build as you get to know someone. But this is where it is going to reach a peak. And then there's going to be a violent episode. It may be physical. It may be just yelling and screaming about how worthless you are. But it's going to be something that is going to be an expression of the abuser's need to exert control over their partner. So how do we get to the honeymoon phase? This is where I think it gets the most dangerous part of the cycle, and this is the part where it will constantly, it will cause the cycle to go again. Between violence and honeymooning is typically love bombing or apologizing profusely or something along those lines, but there will be a key element that will be missing to get back to where everything was going. The key element is that the abuser will not take responsibility. I am so sorry that you made me do this. This wouldn't have happened if you came home on time. Such that it tells the abused partner that everything will be fine if I correct this behavior. And where it gets into the cycle and goes back into the pattern is that it will keep going around and around. The honeymoon period will keep going. Tension will build. There'll be the violent episode, love bombing, back to the honeymoon period. The tension building in particular is often described as walking on eggshells. I don't want to do this. The abused partners tend to get a sense when something is starting to go a little bit off. But one other part about the cycle is that consistently the honeymoon period gets shorter and shorter. And in some cycles, it no longer becomes a cycle, it becomes a ping pong. It goes from tension building to violence, to tension building to violence, to tension building to violence. There's no honeymoon anymore. The abused partner is just trapped. So, I realized the problem with the page over is that it doesn't do the lines. So spoiler alert. So it comes to the big question. Why don't they just leave? I mean, if things are that bad, can't you just get up and go? Often followed by, what is wrong with you? So any thoughts about why someone would not leave an abusive relationship?
Where would they go?
Where would they go?
How would they support themselves?
How can they afford it?
How would they finance it?
How will they finance it?
After a while, the abused begins to believe it is their fault.
Abused believes it is their fault. That is a big one. There's another pretty big one. The most dangerous time to leave, or the most dangerous time of an abusive relationship is when someone is leaving. Yeah. The threat of murder quadruples. So barriers can include the fear of harm to self, children, or others. I won't hurt you, I will get the children, or I will get the dog. The threats of murder come up. Guilt, shame, and blame. It is my fault that I'm in this relationship. I should be ashamed of myself. I need to fix it. Culture. If you let it out, you will feel shame from those around you. Social norms. This goes back to my 80s and Twilight references. This seems to be a normal thing. After all, isn't it romantic to make someone jealous? Love. Quite often, the abused partner does love their abuser. And to note, in most abusive relationships, typically the abuse is happening, starts at a rate of about 5% of the time. Typically, it goes up to about 10 or 15 if it goes on for longer and if it's escalating. But in between, it's wonderful, except for the eggshells piece. Lack of options. They've taken all of my money. I don't have anywhere to go. If I go, what will happen to the children? This one is a particular sensitive topic for me. A particularly close friend of mine has voluntarily stayed in what I know is an abusive relationship because they are worried that separating is going to psychologically damage their children. And in spite of my pleas and begging and won't you just see this, they don't understand that staying in the relationship teaches the children the abusive patterns. And so that is, anyway. I'm going to move on because I will get into that one too long. Lack of support. Your family loves me more than they love you. Victim blaming. It is my fault. It is my fault for being abused, for getting into an abusive relationship. As I mentioned, isolation happens. I've lost all of my friends. I don't have anyone to talk to. Denial. Denial is a big one. I am not in an abusive relationship. When I was working the crisis line, that was a big factor. There were several calls where it was like, my sister told me that I should just talk to you, but I don't think anything major is going on. And only after a long period of about 45 minutes of discussing what was going on and my end of things, educating, was there even an inkling that this is an abusive relationship. Denial commonly comes around with the terms, but he never hit me. Everything else is fine as long as he doesn't hit me. Financial dependence, religious reasons, and I can't leave my partner because divorce is a sin. Immigration status, for those who are not here legally, their partner has included a threat of if you say anything, I'm going to report you, whether it's true or not. Believing it's normal. Remember, most abused partners have seen this kind of thing growing up. This is what they determine or have determined is a normal relationship. Stalking, harassment, as it says, the list goes on and on and on. So let's talk about impacts. So a survivor who has left is still going to have multiple physical health issues. Being in an abusive relationship puts you in fight or flight mode for the majority of the time. Keep in mind, you're walking on eggshells the whole time. Your body is generating a lot of adrenaline. You're going to be having ulcers likely. You're going to have other physical issues. Your mental health is also greatly impacted. It is with the elements of emotional and psychological abuse that are common, doubts about who you are start coming about. Your financial health. Remember how I said that financial abuse was the most common element? Survivors often don't have anything. And then future relationships. They left this one, but statistically, their next one will be the same unless they've learned why they needed to leave their first partner. There was one person who left an abusive relationship because her partner hit him. Sorry, her partner hit her. She got into another one, which was just as abusive emotionally and psychologically, but she stayed because there was never any physical. So, she was getting worn down over time and considered suicide at one point. And her partner said, you're too much of a coward to kill yourself. You're stuck with me. So, and think about what the mindset needs to be to actually get to that point. It's, I am trapped with this person and I don't even have the escape of death. Child survivors, those who have witnessed it, often do have the same physical maladies. Emotionally, again, they are learning these behaviors. They are conflicted between their parents. Is one parent a good guy? Is one parent the bad guy? Often I've seen it where it's when a woman is being abused by her husband. Mommy, if you just did this, he wouldn't do anything. Social relationships are also impacted. I'm sorry, I realize my voice is dropping again. Social relationships are also impacted because, again, they see these things as normal. Sometimes they become bullies. Sometimes they become bullied because of what they've seen. And depending on the nature of the relationship, when an adult survivor leaves, the child may be stuck in the foster care system for a while, which has its own issues. And what about the impact on the family? Divorce is a pretty big impact. In my past life, I was an attorney and I had one family law case. I do not recommend that for anyone to maintain their sanity. Divorce is one of the nastiest legal areas because you have two people who really know each other's buttons and they're going to push all of them on the way out. You'll often see post-separation violence, including financial abuse. The money's going to be hidden so you don't even get it. The financial health of the family on separation is also in question. Social isolation, again, the abused partner has been isolated. Where are they going? Who can they go to? And the secrets, you don't want this to come out. Think about what it will do to us, to the family. Think about how everyone will look at us, which of course goes into the shame of everything. Then the impact on the communities. Domestic violence matters are the most dangerous emergencies for police to respond to. Those are the ones where the highest injuries and highest deaths come. They also take a lot of time for other matters, take away time from other matters. Robbery going on while a domestic violence situation is leaving, the police can't leave that. That's not safe. And it takes a while to get things set up, assuming both partners are still there. If one is left, then they've got to start canvassing the neighborhood as well. Excuse me. Many survivors have housing issues and are homeless. It has a drain on the community resources. School environment for a child who is in an abusive relationship. Again, they are bullied or bullies. The work environment, sick leave is being taken. Recently, California introduced a sick leave law or a leave law for victims of domestic violence, which greatly benefits the survivors. Basically, they cannot be disciplined for needing to take leave relating to taking care of their domestic violence, but it still impacts the work. If people aren't there, then other people need to take up the slack. So it gets harder. So let's talk. We've talked about everything that is bad and wrong. Let's try to talk about something a little bit more cheerful. So we've got STAND, and their mission statement is that Stand for Families Free of Violence is a catalyst for breaking the multi-generational cycle of violence, promoting safe and strong relationships, and rebuilding lives. So it does this in the three-part, a three-part setup. So STAND is the only comprehensive family violence reduction agency in Contra Costa County and assists more than 10,000 clients annually by providing free services through their different program areas. There's one exception to the free services, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So the three program areas are saving lives, rebuilding families, and changing the future. So we'll start with changing the future. We want to prevent violence from happening in the first place. So STAND has a youth education and support services program which operates mostly in West County, where youth in Richmond and the like are educated and provide education to their peers. They provide presentations similar to this one, but also tabling and such to educate their peers about domestic violence, and in particular the elements of teen dating violence that are more prevalent to them. Speakers Bureau, you get me. Volunteer services, you still get me. Volunteer services include Speakers Bureau. It includes working on the crisis and counseling line. It also includes things like painting a room or doing laundry. There are multiple ways that volunteers help. So intervention, saving lives. You've got the crisis and counseling line, and the name was changed from crisis line a bit ago because often the thought is you only should be calling it when you're in crisis. The crisis and counseling line provides education. You don't have to be in an abusive relationship to call. We are happy to educate you or give you ideas or resources. Emergency shelter. Our shelter takes in all adults of all gender IDs and children. This is different from some other counties where some shelters will only accept women, some will only accept female children. And then there is a DV liaison excuse me, it has been one of those days, a DV liaison project, which basically these liaisons operate around the courts and interact with the Family Justice Center to facilitate getting help for those who need legal assistance or other advocacy assistance that is not appropriate just for the crisis and counseling line. But all of these resources start through the crisis and counseling line. And then finally there's treatment, rebuilding families. It is hoped that families can be rebuilt, not necessarily with the same partners, but for parents with children, it is imperative, in particular relating to the children, that everyone is cared for. Those who have gone through Stan's program, the children get free counseling until their age of 18. Stan also offers transitional housing, so this is an opportunity at reduced rent for survivors to have their own house. Again, there's been multiple financial issues. Money has been withheld. They don't have financial resources. Stan is able to provide short-term housing that may go longer. Excuse me. And then finally, there is the nonviolence program, which is the one non-free Stan service. This was previously called Batterer's Intervention, which is a court-ordered program for those who have abused to learn to stop, learn to break their own patterns, their own habits. It's not perfect, but it does have about a 25% success rate, was what I was hearing last. So, it's better. It is better than nothing. But the nonviolence program has cost because the court is ordering it, and that's how it is. So, my last slide. How can you help? Take what you've learned, teach others. Say, hey, Stan does presentations. You probably want to hear this. If you know of someone who is in an abusive relationship, make yourself available. And this is something that's not in the slides themselves, but going back to the area of denial. Many abused partners do not recognize that they are in an abusive relationship, and in some cases will refuse to see it. What that means is don't push them. Be open, listen. Again, one of the other tactics is isolation. Make it known that you are available for anything that they want to talk about. But again, keep your own boundaries too, because this is a very heavy topic. If you are in an abusive relationship, give the Crisis and Counseling line a call. And there are ways to do that safely if you are being monitored. The counseling line also has resources to help you with avoiding tracking software and the like. But if you are in a safe location and are at a place where you need assistance, call. Stan always needs money. Donate if you can. Join as a volunteer. You can do this. You can. It does not need to be this dramatic, though. We often need help with one of the areas with the emergency shelter and with transitional housing is that we provide services like clothing, needing supplies, including menstrual supplies and the like, food, toys, but also sometimes when someone has left the transitional housing and is ready for a new resident, we need the place painted. So there are multiple volunteer opportunities. So I hope that, if you can, take advantage. If you can't, I hope that this was interesting and educational, and at least a little bit entertaining. Well, thank you very much.